Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today's video is all about treating mildews on your cucumber plants, squash, zucchini, cantaloupe, watermelon. First I want to show you how to kind of identify it, well hopefully definitely identify it. This is a cucumber plant that has been beat up probably by downy mildew. Sometimes it can be a little confusing. Is it downy mildew? Is it powdery mildew? What kind of fungus is on there? It doesn't matter exactly because they're all treated the same way. So you're really looking for patterns that let you know that you have some sort of mildew on the leaves. When your cucumber leaves end up getting nice and crispy like that, it's usually downy mildew. That's what we get here in Maryland Zone 7. And I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I'm never 100% sure because when we had the high heat here through late June through July into the first week of August, it wasn't here. I was also spraying a little bit more for my anti-fungal. But once the temperatures became right, increase in humidity, warmer days, cooler nights, the nights are dropping into the 60s, the downy mildew really took off. And you're going to see the different patterns. Let me show you a better example of how to begin to identify it. Here's my third wave of cucumbers. This one's going to get sprayed. The leaves up here, nice and green. As you start coming down, it's going to be hard to see here, but you can see a little bit of lightness in the green color on the leaf. Turn it over, looks pretty good. Come down to the next leaf, and you'll see it's going to get stronger. More yellow patterns on there, and then you drop down to here. And that's when you can really identify the light yellow pattern on the underside. The mildew tends to stop where the veins are in the leaves, so you get these really interesting angular blotches on your plant of yellow. And then if you progress down more, the leaf looks like that, and then all the way down to where the downy mildew caught on. That leaf is dead. Usually travels upward, can go sideways, prefers moisture, high humidity, you know, light rains, cooler night temperatures in the 60s, day temperatures in the 80s. That's when it really takes off. I can save this plant. Sometimes on the underside you might see like a gray fuzz under there. It can be faint. It's hard to tell sometimes. Different mildews, powdery mildew, downy mildew, will have different patterns. Some patterns have the mildew on the outer part of the leaf. But when you start seeing this pattern show up on your cucumber leaves, you just want to spray an antifungal. And I'll be going over that shortly. That's the pattern that lets you know that you've got a mildew on your cucumber leaves. This is my cantaloupe plant. Lots of damage on the leaves. The mildew here, you can see on the outer part of the leaf. It looks like, you know, fine powder on there. And it's doing the same thing that it did on the cucumbers. On the outsides, on the undersides, you get these angular shapes. Cantaloupe and cucumbers have these veins on the underside. And the veins actually stop the mildew from spreading, so it spreads out into that space. The veins are a border, and then it leaves that dead pattern right on there. And basically you can just say, oh, okay, I've got a mildew on my plant, I need to spray it with an antifungal. This plant probably will survive. Here's another example of, let's see if we can get that in there, of the white powder like substance on the leaves. That's like fuzz. That is the active mildew. So we want to coat this really in any antifungal that you pick. It can be, you know, a synthetic, chemical, human-made, can be organic. The whole key is to start spraying before the disease arrives. And I let this go for the sake of the video. And I really don't need these plants anymore. But my mildews tend to show up when the temperatures start to drop in the evening, during the day, and the humidity is still around here in Maryland Zone 7. So I'd want to be spraying several weeks before that happens, you know, and then every 2 weeks to keep the mildew under control. There's some good cantaloupe left on here, so I want to get the spray on here and, you know, let this plant survive just a little bit longer. Zucchini and squash plants get mildews on the leaves pretty easily. Again, the temperatures have to be right, so I recommend keeping a journal, make notes of when the mildews show up in your garden, and the next year you want to be spraying a good 2 weeks before that happens. That is just insect dust right here, but when you come over to this side, you can see the mildew. And The blotching patterns are starting to happen on here. Every plant will have sometimes a different mildew that affects it, so you're not always getting the same exact patterns. You can see some of the powder right on there. This is just starting. You can see this leaf is dying off, and you can see the mildew growing on there. We just want to hit this nicely, top of the leaves, bottom of the leaves, with an antifungal. Some of the choices, you can use Daconil. That is not organic, that's over the counter, that's human made. You can use baking soda spray, you can use Wettable sulfur spray, you can use a copper based fungicide. Whatever you want to use, you just want to be consistent with it. 2 cucumber plants in this space have been producing, well, have been growing since June 1st, so it is now September 3rd. Really productive. The fungus is coming in, killing it off. That's okay, I'm ready to get rid of this plant. It was so productive. Kept it healthy from June all the way up until now by really keeping the sprays on here every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. Again, I want to stress, when we had temperatures 90, 95, almost 100 degrees for a several week period, the fungus was not an issue. Every state, every garden, every country, you're going to have different diseases that roll in with respect to the downy mildews and powdery mildews. Different plants will get them. Just keep that journal, keep track of what shows up. But when you start seeing patterns like this on your cucumber plants, you see the white kind of fuzz on the leaves of squash and zucchini, you know you have a mildew. This is my watermelon patch. I've been spraying regularly all the way up until about 2 weeks ago, so it's ready for another spray. I want this group to stay healthy. It takes longer for melons to get to the size that I want here in Maryland. I would do the same thing for pumpkins if I was growing pumpkins this year. Stay up on the sprays for watermelons. For pumpkins, cucumbers, and squash, I replace the plants. But the melons, specifically the watermelons and the pumpkins, can take 100 days to mature, so I can't really replace these plants. My point being is, look how just beautiful and green everything is. There's no spotting on there. I don't see any yellowing, no kind of white gray fuzz growing on anything. The leaves are really healthy, and I know in Maryland if I don't do that spray every 2 weeks, it's going to be a problem. On my pumpkins, when I grow them, on my watermelons, I use Daconil, which is a chemical. A lot of people don't want to use that. The reason I use it on here is because it's waterproof, it stays on, lets them grow. I don't believe the plants absorb that chemical, but I'm using heavy rind crops. So the watermelon, I know that I can wash off. I'm not going to be eating the chemical. I wouldn't want to use that on my cucumbers, smaller melons, on my squash when I'm picking things small. Just don't want it on there. For those, I typically use baking soda spray. Just 2 tablespoons of baking soda in a gallon of water. That works really well. It changes the pH on the leaves, it's organic, and it keeps the fungus off. Right now I'm experimenting. What I'm going to be showing you is 2 tablespoons of baking soda in 1.5 gallons of water and 1 cup of milk. I don't recommend you use that. I'm experimenting with it, but milk also helps stop fungus from growing. So before I talk about it in videos in depth and recommend it, I like to test it out. But just pick, my point is, pick any antifungal and go ahead and spray. And you can see 2 melons right back there. There's a melon right down there. And for the heavier rind crops, I don't mind using the chemical type antifungals. I do research them. I find in-depth information about them from usually different colleges and stuff like that, universities, and read the research and decide whether or not I want to use it in my garden. What you take from this is that if you stick to a routine, you can keep those downy mildews and powdery mildews off of your watermelons, your pumpkins, your cantaloupe, squash, zucchini, and cucumbers. It's also important to mention that the fungus can be unique to that plant, the fungi. These are Armenian cucumbers. They have that downy type mildew pattern where the mildew tends to be on the underside, angular yellow spotting that gives way to the brown patches. And again, you're going to have different mildews. I don't know exactly which each one is, but I know that it's a fungi, and it doesn't matter. 9 times out of 10 in your garden, when you see patterns like this, it's going to be related to a fungus. So the treatment is exactly the same. It's just an antifungal on there. So I've sprayed the Armenian cucumbers. they're going to be fine. They're going to be hit with the water-soluble fertilizer, get the leaves growing. But the fungus on the plants here are different than the white fuzz that I showed you on the zucchini plants over here. These plants will actually be just covered in this kind of white, it looks like baby powder was lightly sprinkled everywhere. Where the patterns over here are going to be more on the underside, angular yellowing and browning. So both plants got treated, but it's different fungi on each plant. Please subscribe. My garden is a teaching garden. I have all kinds of different growing beds and like to spend time really explaining what I'm doing so you can make informed choices. This is a 2-gallon sprayer, just your basic Home Depot brand. Filled this to 1.5 gallons of water, 2 tablespoons of baking soda, 1 cup of milk. That's something I'm experimenting with just to see if the milk makes a difference. Plenty of videos on baking soda spray if you want to look those up. Always test spray before you use sprays. I'm going in here, this is my final wave of cucumbers. It has that disease pattern right there. And really, all I have to do is do this every week to 10 days to 14 days, depending on the conditions. When it's really the prime conditions for this downy mildew, cooler nights, humid days, light rains, I might do this every 7 days. That plant is now protected from the downy mildew. I'll remove this leaf after it dries. I like to spray all my plants, coat the infected leaves, and then when they dry I'll remove the damaged ones. And if they have a little bit of spotting on there, I'll leave them. If it looks something like that, I'll remove that. Let me get closer. This is the plant that I showed earlier in the video, and the lower leaves, you know, are infected, but you know, new side shoots start coming out. So again, you want to get in, definitely get the undersides, because some of these mildews, let me get the camera to where it should be. Some of these mildews prefer the undersides of the leaves. Some of them prefer the tops of the leaves. You want to just soak in the entire plant. I like to soak the ground in case any spores or things fall to the ground, or maybe they're sitting on host weeds, and really get in there and spray everything. This one needs a little more spraying, which I can't do with, you know, just one hand here. Again, every 7, 10, 14 days, the infected leaves really soak, and that will take care of the mildews. This cucumber plant is going to be perfectly fine. Here's another cucumber plant. Everything up top looks pretty good. As we come down to the bottom, you see those yellow marks on there, the angular patterns, because remember, the fungus stops where the ridges are on the underside of the leaf. So you get these really interesting patterns, and that's how you know that you have some sort of mildew. And again, sometimes you're going to see the actually white-gray fuzz growing on the plants. Sometimes you won't, but you want to really get all the undersides, soak them down, and then when this is dry, I'll come in and I'll remove that leaf, all the dead leaves, but really just cover everything nicely. The mildew on the cantaloupe you can easily see, and I'm just going to take the time first. I'm just going to go through and just spray the entire surface of the plant, you know, from this angle. And then, because of this trellis, I can get in and spray the undersides pretty easily. That's why I like trellising. This is a almost 10-foot trellis that I made. But you really want to get in, soak the top of the leaves. Here's all the new growth. These leaves are really important because a lot of the leaves are damaged, but I want this plant to survive long enough. I got to put little hammocks on these, but I have more cantaloupe coming in, so I want to make sure that they're okay. I want to show you on this side, I have watermelon growing, and they're looking pretty good. There's nothing on there. These did get sprayed. I have a watermelon, a sugar baby right there. That's going to need to be given a hammock and tied to this so the weight of the melon doesn't pull it off of the plant. Undersides of the melon really cover the leaves. Top of the leaves, and just stay up with your spray. The damage down there at the bottom, that's just from heat and some watering issues. Soak the plants down well. This process of regular spraying any antifungal really of your choice really makes a difference, and it will keep your plants healthy through the disease periods of these different fungus. For the squash and zucchini, certainly coat the top of the leaves, get the undersides, really spray them down. I'm going to link the video I did on the complete guide for growing squash zucchini and a complete guide for growing cucumbers. It talks about pruning. Like a lot of these leaves that are on top of each other, I'm going to remove the ones down on the bottom. They just don't need to be there, and they're going to breed or host the fungus more than it's really needed to be. You really just need the leaves up top here, the ones that are erect above the ground, not on top of each other like this. Remove those excess leaves and you'll have less issues with the fungus, the powdery mildew, the downy mildews that grow on here. But just soak them down and make sure you get the undersides. Just because there's no markings of any kind of fungus or signs of a fungus on my watermelon plants doesn't mean I don't want to spray. It's been about 14 days. The best way to stop disease is really prevention. And again, I'm going to stress, as a new gardener, or even, seasoned gardener, you're going to learn what kind of diseases come into your gardens. So take notes. Preventive spraying works best. So I've soaked down the tops of these leaves, and then I would want to get on the undersides and just spray too. But these these watermelons are doing really, really well. They're going to fully produce. I found 4 watermelons on here right now. You want to keep them alive. Maryland Zone 7, mid-August, the downy mildews and the powdery mildews really roll in because the temperatures drop, and that's what they like. They like those conditions to multiply and grow and take out your garden plants. I do recommend trellising your cucumbers, cantaloupe, your lighter melons. This is, I think I said 10 feet. This is an 8-foot trellis. I would put the build of this trellis in the video description. I like being able to get right into the center via the trellis and just spray the undersides of the leaves. It just makes spraying and maintenance so much easier. A nice even coat of spray across all the different plants will take care of the fungus. What you want to do as kind of the final step is, these plants have lost a lot of leaves. You can see the new leaves coming in right here. Make sure they're well coated because you want them to survive. Hit your plant with any water-soluble fertilizer. I recommend AgroThrive. I'm affiliated with them. They are an organic company. The fertilizer is organic. It's wonderful stuff. You want to hit these plants with any water-soluble because that nitrogen is going to be immediately available to the plants. They're going to just take it in right away when watered, and that nitrogen will go to rebuilding the leaves. That will get the plants back on track, and I'm waiting for the rest of those cantaloupe to really form. I got one right up here. It's actually balanced on a string. That is keeping it from pulling off the plant. That one is ready to pick. I think I'm on that's number 5 off of the 2 plants right here, and I have like 6 or 7 more coming. Nice even spray, water-soluble fertilizer, whatever antifungal you want to use, just stick to a routine. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. Spray the tops and the bottoms of the leaves again every 2 weeks. You'll do really well with managing fungus in your garden. Thanks for watching.